Unprecedented. That is the one word that accurately describes the current events unfolding in Maharashtra. While more than two-thirds MLAs of the Shiv Sena party are demanding some major changes in the party's alliance structures, the Shiv Sena cadre is getting ready to pick up arms and fight a battle with their own brothers. The atmosphere is tense. The BJP is deafeningly silent, and the NCP and the Congress are struggling to keep the house intact. Now I know all of us are bombarded with charged statements, arguments, and accusations from all sides. But I'm going to attempt and investigate this entire event from a completely different angle. I'm going to try and present answers to these three questions. Why did a bunch of MLAs led by Mr. Eknath Shinde decide to rebel against the leadership of Shiv Sena? Why did Mr. Uddhav Thackeray decide to leave Varsha, the official residence of Maharashtra CM, and head back to Matoshri? And what are the decisions Mr. Thackeray can make to keep his party together and chart a desirable course for the future? Oh, and one more thing. Is there a possibility that Mr. Thackeray actually creates history and sets precedent for the biggest political reform our country needs? Stay till the end, do scrutinize my investigation to its finest details, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's go. The country woke up to a big shock on the morning of 21st June when 20-odd Shiv Sena MLAs were reported unreachable. They were later traced to be in a hotel in Surat, led by Mr. Eknath Shinde. Mr. Eknath Shinde is a four-time MLA and the current Cabinet Minister of Urban Development and Public Works. The camp kept on swelling. It moved further away to Assam and has declared mutiny against the party leadership. Their chief demand is shifting the alliance back from the MVA to NDA. Interesting. Now, why they chose to move to Assam is another funny story that needs investigation, but let's keep that for later. In the middle of all arguments and threats and accusations that have been shouted at them, they seem to be pretty calm and composed. Please make a note of this point. Now, just while the party was recovering from its shocking loss in MLC polls, the rebellion news broke out. It shook the entire political balance in the state of Maharashtra. Everybody was scrambling their sources and resources to try and make sense of what is happening. Emissaries were sent, public notices issued, statements to the press, the Facebook Live, and all the other back channels that they must have tried. But the Shiv Sena, and more importantly Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, just couldn't get the situation under control. The NCP and the Congress are still struggling to find what position they must take. The Shiv Sena cadre, of course, is severely hit. At the end of the day, nobody wants infighting inside a family. Some have expressed their extreme anger, some extreme pain. How do you salvage such a situation? Well, their current approach still seems to be a bit incoherent to me. A majority of them are still hoping for all the rebellious MLAs to get back home and resolve the fight. But some, like Mr. Sanjay Raut, have picked up an aggressive stance. Some, like Mr. Bhaskar Jadhav, have picked up a more empathetic stand. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray himself, under tremendous pressure and stress that he must be in, also feels like an injured tiger. In all possibilities, that makes him more fierce. Only time will tell if he will deal with this situation by being his empathetic self or borrow some of the firebrand ferocity of Balasaheb. The group of MLAs in Guwahati, on the other hand, seem to be standing strong together. I find it very peculiar that they are so calm during this entire process. There doesn't seem to be any thread of fear or panic amongst any of those. Their motivations seem to be deeper than whatever is being talked about. And everybody who has spoken throughout these last couple of days has mentioned the same reasons, that they are unhappy with the party's alliance structure. Well, this also aligns with the Shiv Sena's entire history and core ideology. The decision of Shiv Sena to break the alliance with the BJP and forming a government with the NCP and Congress, their bitterest foes, was not digested by a lot of people, including us, the common citizen. And mind you, most of us had also criticized Mr. Devendra Fadnavis's early morning shocker with Mr. Ajit Pawar. But more about BJP later. This group of MLAs led by Mr. Eknath Shinde clearly are not going to budge till their demands are met, even at the cost of them leaving the family, or maybe even staging a complete coup d'etat and taking over Shiv Sena by overthrowing the Thakres. Yes, that is definitely a non-zero possibility, and Mr. Thakre definitely realizes this threat. Now the options in front of Mr. Uddhav Thackeray are pretty clear. The ball is in his court. The options are: he attempts a hardline approach, picks up arms and tries to fight this battle like a strong man. This clearly is the biggest possibility, given the current forces driving his decision making. Pressure to act more as Bala would have. Many stakeholders in the party and outside the party would be making a case. Bala Sahib agar hote, to no one would have dared take such an action against the party. Mr. Thackeray and many others in his party seem to be in the stage 3 of anger and blame. And as the alliance weakens, there will be added pressure from NCP and the Congress, including threats of withdrawing all support. There was already a news report which suggested Mr. Sharad Pawar was willing to take charge of the Shiv Sena situation. Now, in light of all of this, it would be unsurprising if Mr. Uddhav Thackeray and whatever is left of Shiv Sena will pick up arms and get into a fight. The other option is to attempt a more empathetic approach and implement a political solution which will make him a strong man. To be honest, this is more of a hope than a possibility. But for argument's sake, let's assume the BJP has played no role in this, and the rebellion is as honest and genuine as it can get. Now, this assumption helps us uncover a more empathetic approach, which can not only resolve all the issues for Mr. Thackeray, but also grow his charisma and acceptance as a political leader. One of the founding principles of a strong democracy is decentralizing the power of decision making. Do you recall what is called the celebration of democracy? Yes, elections, votes. Voting-based decision-making has resolved a huge variety of complex social, political, financial, and other critical problems for us. And my analysis suggests that this tool presents the most empathetic, yet rational and pragmatic solution to the current crisis in Shiv Sena. Here's how it could work out. Step 1. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray should announce a referendum where all the publicly elected leaders of the party will vote. This should include all their elected representatives right from Gram Panchayat to the Rajya Sabha. Step 2. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray should announce a public meeting where Mr. Eknath Shinde should present the case for stitching the alliance back with the BJP. Similarly, Mr. Thackeray should present the case for why the Shiv Sena should continue with their Mahavikas Aghadi alliance. Step 3. Once the vote is done, Shiv Sena should adopt the course as decided by this referendum vote. This will not only help Mr. Thackeray bring his family back together, but will also address any resentment, doubts and questions in their supporters and voters' mind. But do you know what the most interesting part is? If the rebelling members have revolted for motivations other than ideological differences as they claim, they will disagree with the above proposal. And that is additional leverage Mr. Uddhav Thackeray can get. Anyway, irrespective of whatever Mr. Uddhav Thackeray decides, the currently unfolding events in Maharashtra will have a long-lasting impact on Indian politics. If Mr. Thackeray and the Shiv Sena decides to pick up the arms and fight, there will be a lot of bloodshed. No one will come out of this unharmed, and the damage will be permanent. Mind you, this event is being watched by many dynastic parties in the country. The Shiv Sena rebellion has already set a precedent in this fight. Mr. Eknath Shinde-led group of MLAs, which represent more than 2/3 of their state-elected representatives, have publicly spoken against the decision made by the party chief Mr. Thackeray. The very ceiling that a party supremo's decision cannot be challenged has been broken. So yes, I'm sure all the single-family controlled political parties are watching these events carefully. If Mr. Thackeray and the Shiv Sena decides to fight it out physically, emotionally, publicly and legally, it will be a bloody war. And if Mr. Thackeray and Shiv Sena go the referendum way, they will create history. Mr. Thackeray has the opportunity to craft his own place in the history right now by becoming a strong leader in the face of adversity. I feel political parties are the biggest custodians of our nation's democracy. Our democracy will always be as strong as our political parties make it. And embracing the tools of democracy to resolve internal differences, and that too publicly, will only make our country stronger. And if you are able to set this precedent, Mr. Uddhav sir, you will be the champion of the biggest political reform our country needs. And that would be an ideal impact of this Shiv Sena rebellion. I rest my case. To all those who have stayed till this part of the video, thank you so much. I hope I was a good storyteller too. I started studying about decision making around 8 months ago, and by my 30th birthday in Jan, I knew I wanted to share this journey with you. I realized that understanding how to make better decisions in different walks of life is a critical lesson our schools never taught us. And by learning how we make decisions will help us build a better future. So please share your feedback on how I can tell better stories. I plan to tell stories about how we make decisions in our personal life, how building and growing and managing a business is all about the decisions we make, how to make decisions as a society, how do nations make decisions in the global arena, and how can we learn to make decisions with global interests in mind. This is me, Praddy, your investigator, and see you next Saturday, 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Ciao.